I don't have a funny intro, so before we start, let's do a quick banner review. For starters, we have the best character in the game, Furina, the closest thing to a must pull for every account that doesn't have her, with some of the best early constellations in the game. Then for 4 stars, we have Gaming, and if you can get his C6, he's one of the best pyro carries that can compete with the top 3. Then you have Noelle, who can be a solid DPS, but nothing noteworthy. In my opinion, is better as a Furina driver, focusing on her healing and shielding. Lastly, Rosaria. In the current meta, she's kind of shit. Cryo now is kind of in a bad state, and because of Furina, cryo healers are just generally more preferred, so I would build them over Rosaria. So overall, a solid banner. Oh yeah, let's talk about Sigewinne now. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be talking all about Miss Melusine and why she isn't really that great of a pull in her current state, going over her kit, team options, and why she feels so out of place in Genshin's meta. So TLDR, just go for Furina. Speaking of which, hi! Furina and Sigewinne are finally here, so if you'd like to save yourself some cash, then I'd like to announce the sponsor of today's video, Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a safe service I've been using for a few months now that allows you to buy primary gems at a 20% discount, only needing your UID and region. So if I just do this... And would you look at that, in only 3 minutes I've received my gems. I got the 3,280 gems pack at only £37, saving me £8 from the original price. This site has also been endorsed by other creators like Tavot Times, Dukaja, and now yours truly. Loot Bar essentially acts as a gateway, using a VPN to cut down on the cost of gems by removing certain taxes, whilst going through the official top-up methods for the game, which allows you to enjoy all the same benefits as in-game. So use my link in the description below to get a 5% off new user coupon on your purchase. Thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring the video, now back to it. I did already make a video covering her beta kit, and from there not much has really changed about her, so I'll pretty much briefly go over the basics of her kit. She's a 5-star Hydro Bow user who is centered around healing and doing damage, both of which scale off of her HP, as well as giving a minor buff to skill damage and crowd controlling small enemies with her bowls. Hi, post-editing Flip here, and I just really quickly need to discuss this Sigewinne trailer, because what in the blue archive is going on here? Hoyoverse! I've never felt more violated consuming a piece of media, and I just needed to share that with everyone before moving on. Back to the video. Her normal attacks are just normal attacks, but she does get a special charge shot that will continuously do Hydra damage, but it scales off of attack. Sigewinne is a HP scaler, so just don't even bother, it's about as useful as Yoimiya's charge attack. Her skill will show out a bubble that bounces 5 times, each bounce will heal your entire team except the Melusine herself, and after it bounces 5 times, it will then heal her for 50% of her max HP. You can charge up the bubble to make it heal more and do more damage, but due to the amount of time it takes to do so, you are better off just tapping the skill, and it's about a 20k heal for each character, which is pretty good, especially factoring Furina's healing bonus on top of this. Her burst makes her just deal Hydra damage, but you don't build her with crit anyway, so at C0 it does no damage, unless you want to compromise the rest of her kit. Wonderful design, Hoyoverse. And the last important thing to talk about in Sigewinne's kit is her A1 that increases the damage of off-field skill damage besides herself. It is a flat damage increase like Shenhe and stacks 10 times team-wide, so if you have multiple off-field skill attackers you will lose this immediately basically. And overall it is about a 15% damage increase adding up for all 10 hits, which is kind of minimal for an off-field unit, most of which don't do nearly enough damage as a carry, where these buffs matter significantly more. That's about every important thing to discuss in her kit. She generates source water droplets too, I guess, but like, it doesn't matter. We can now discuss why she isn't that great. Point 1. She has no fucking teams. Sorry, that was rude. She has one team, where she's a side grid. Sigewinne is designed to be run with Furina filling in the healer role as well as buffing her damage, so she can complement one type of Furina team, being a Furina driver basically. Siege, Furina, Kazuha, and another off-field unit, and she should work there, also giving her Song of Days Past for further buffing. The awkward thing about these teams, however, is that if you add someone like Fischl, you just get less stacks onto Furina, splitting the buffing between the two of them, which I guess can be seen as a positive, and the buff isn't that impactful anyway, so it isn't that big of a deal. The reason why you can't really utilize Sigewinne outside of these Furina driving teams comes down to the fact that there's always just a much better alternative to her as a healer. Furina already applies enough Hydra for most teams, so double stacking is kind of useless in cases like freeze teams or quick bloom, where you are better off with a cryo or dendro healer. For new Volette teams, even though she generates source water droplets, you aren't dropping a draconic stack for this unless you're an idiot. And then even in cases where you might not have enough Hydra application, well then you have Yolan or Jingzhou, and then you can slot in a different healer and this will be better offensively. If Sigewinne universally buffed skill damage, then maybe there would have been a place for her in Navia teams, but she doesn't even do that either, as it has to be off-field skill damage. So what type of team is she supposed to go on? There are currently too many good healers like Baizu, Zhongyun, Charlotte, or Jean that are better universally for Furina teams, due to them belonging to a more synergistic element. And if you take her outside of Furina teams, then she only becomes a general healer, to where you could quite literally just run any other healer at that point. And you would think, wait, but Sigewinne is Hydro, therefore she should be good due to this, as Hydro gives you the best range of reactions. But like, Hydro is one of the most competitive elements already, and not only that, but Sigewinne doesn't even apply a ton of Hydro. Assuming you tap her skill, she applies Hydro 3 times, as she applies it for once every other bounce, if I remember correctly. So she gets 3 Hydro applications every 18 seconds with her skill. Absolutely phenomenal, game breaking even. And her burst isn't applying a lot of Hydro either, on top of having to be on field to use it. So like, she is barely a Hydro character at that. I'm not even sure you can cope with her on Nilu teams with that. Speaking of cope actually, Sigewinne is coming out in 4.7. Congratulations, it's Pride Month, which means she is very close to Natlan's release, so my hope is that she's being designed with future characters in mind. Otherwise, I actually just don't know. Her kit is way too weird currently and it feels like there has to be something missing. Maybe a character that can take advantage of her weird Bond of Life generation, or another character that uses source water droplets, or a character that can attack very slowly while off field to use her flat buff. And even with this in mind, I don't think you should pull for Siege with the hope she gets better later on, as that is literal copium. You should only pull or build characters that you like, or characters that will add value to your account at that moment. Otherwise it can wait. The Genshin community has this very weird thing where it gets very gatekeepy of units that get better later on. Like Kuki for example was a bottom 5 character on release, and then Dendra came out and made her usable, and then people started acting like it was wrong to misjudge Kuki when she did suck on release. So I would recommend holding off on Miss Melusine for now unless you really like her. Or C0 Sigewinne without her signature isn't looking the hottest, as she's a mix of a DPS healer and buffer, while only really being good at one of those categories. But if you happen to throw some extra cash her way, she actually has some cons that make more sense of her kit. For starters, just getting her signature weapon will give you such an absurd amount of HP that you can forego using a healing bonus or HP circlet and instead use a crit one, while also giving Sigewinne 20% crit rate for her burst. So now her burst can hit more solid numbers to justify its field time on top of not losing any of your healing. Then carrying on with the early investments, her C1 increases the quota of her buff to 18, while also making the buff stronger for closer to a 30% damage increase for an off-field character. And her bubble also bounces 3 more times for an extra Hydra application and more healing. C2 then offers a 35% Hydra res shred, which is an insane buff that's also relatively early. So you can either get her weapon and focus more on her damage, or you can get her first 2 cons to massively increase her supportive capabilities for Furina, or you could just pull for Furina constellations. All this to say that Sigewinne gains a lot of value from her cons, which are pretty early, so if you want to make her feel more impactful, then this can be your way to do so, or just pull Furina constellations. C4 and C6 are of course way later on, but they do just increase her damage profile. So all, in her current state, unless you plan to vertically invest in her, I would strongly recommend you don't pull for Sigewinne unless you really like her, as her current team options are very limited and awkward to build for. Her buffing profile is quite weak even with the high amount of HP investment. Her damage also isn't anything to write home about, and causes you to have to sacrifice her other benefits in order to work. Despite being a Hydra unit, her Hydra application is close to non-existent, and well, I guess her healing is good, but that isn't really much at all with the plethora of good healers we have now. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Sigewinne, as I'd love to hear and respond to almost every single comment. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.